What's up guys, MCMMA here, and in today's video I am going to be breaking down who I think the best UFC fighter is at each ranking. So I'm going to be looking at the 8 men's divisions from flyweight to heavyweight, and for each ranking, like for example, number 12, I'm going to pick the best out of those 8 fighters who are ranked number 12 in their division. Alright, let's get right into it. At the number 15 spot, I think the best ranked fighter at number 15 is bantamweight Marcus McGee. It really came down to Marcus McGee or Joe Pyfer, who's ranked 15 at middleweight, and I ended up going with McGee. I was pretty impressed by his performance against Petr Yan. I knew Yan was going to win, and I think a lot of people thought so too, but McGee looked pretty competitive. He was able to put up a decent fight, especially early on, and to lose a fairly close fight to a guy like Petr Yan is not embarrassing at all. And outside of that, McGee has won every fight of his in the UFC, and I think that he should get another ranked opponent in his next fight because he looked like he definitely belongs in the bantamweight rankings, and he probably is a guy who could maybe make it to the top 10 at some point if he keeps fighting the way that he has been. All right, at the number 14 spot, I've got lightweight Grant Dawson. This one was pretty obvious for me. As some of you may know, if you watched my most underrated fighters video, I think that Grant Dawson is one of the most underrated fighters in the entire UFC. He's a guy who is 11-1 in the UFC in his career, with his only loss coming to Bobby Green, which, as I've kind of discussed before, I thought that one was a bit of a fluke. But outside of that, he's been winning pretty easily. He's beaten a lot of quality opponents like Diego Fajeda, Rafa Garcia, Damir Ismagulov, and he's fighting another unranked fighter in his next fight, Manuel Torres, and I think that he should be able to get that one done pretty easily. I think the main reason that he has been getting unfavorable matchups and isn't very well regarded is just because he's a very boring fighter. And I know that, even though I think he's underrated, I know he's a boring fighter, and it's not like I'm excited whenever a Grant Dawson fight gets announced. I'm not counting down the days until he fights, but he is still a very good fighter, and I think he's definitely the best who's ranked number 14. All right, at number 13, I've got a bit of a sleeper pick. I'm going with flyweight Charles Johnson. For me, it really came down to Charles Johnson and bantamweight Vinicius Oliveira. I kind of debated that one for a little bit, but I ended up going with Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson is another guy who I think is super underrated. The run that he's on right now is pretty impressive. He's only lost one of his last 5 fights, and I put an asterisk on there because his opponent, Ramazan Temirov, popped for steroids very shortly after their fight, and I think he's suspended for a full year. He got suspended and he got taken out the rankings. So, his loss, I don't even know how much stock you can put into that one. But as you can see, the one that really stands out is the win over Joshua Van. Super impressive win. He's the only guy in the UFC to beat Van, and as we know, Joshua Van is going to be fighting for the title at the end of the year. So, super impressive win there. And he's also got quality wins like Loner Kavanaugh, Sumuderji. He should get a big fight next. I know that the UFC offered him a fight against Steve Urseg for the Madison Square Garden card, I believe it was, but Urseg turned it down because he's getting married. But that's a good sign. It means that the UFC wants to get Charles Johnson in a bigger fight so they can get some more eyes on him, and I think that's great. And I think that he is the best ranked fighter at number 13, just slightly better than Vinicius Oliveira. All right, at number 12, I have got welterweight Jeff Neal. Number 12 spot is really weak. If we look at some guys that are ranked there, like Tagir Ulanbekov at flyweight, I don't think much of him. Rob Font, okay. Patricio Pitbull, Michael Chandler, a lot of old fighters who have not been having much success recently are kind of ranked around number 12. And I think out of that group, Jeff Neal is the best one of the bunch. I still think that he's a pretty solid welterweight. As you can see, he's been getting a lot of tough opponents lately, like Carlos Prates, Ian Gary, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Those are not fights that are easy to win, especially if you're an older guy like Jeff Neal. So I think, especially in the Ian Gary fight, that fight was a fucking snooze fest, but you could have argued that Neal won that fight. It was very close. And he's been competitive in most of his fights outside of the Prates loss. In the Shavkat fight, he was able to sting Shavkat a couple times, and that fight was an absolute banger. I love watching that fight back. But Jeff Neal is still pretty solid. I think that he should be able to maintain his place in the welterweight rankings, and is a pretty thin competition for the number 12 spot. So Jeff Neal is my pick. All right, at number 11, I have got featherweight Gene Silva. Silva coming off the loss to Diego Lopez most recently at UFC Noche. Absolutely amazing fight. I thought that Silva could have won the fight if he had stayed more patient and stuck to his game plan, because especially in the second round, he was really stinging Diego Lopez. He was hitting him with some huge shots. Diego Lopez's chin is insane, because I don't know how he didn't get knocked out by some of the shots that he was getting hit with. But Gene Silva ended up getting a little too reckless and walked right into a spinning back elbow. So it was a tough loss for him, but I think that he will definitely learn from that. And like we know, he's an elite fighter. Like, he's really, really good. He is not, I mean, there are not 10 guys in the featherweight division that are better than him. The only reason that he's ranked where he's at is because he just hasn't faced that many high-level opponents. So I think that he will climb the rankings pretty easily. I would be shocked if he doesn't beat his next opponent, whoever it is, because it'll probably be somebody ranked around where he is, and I think he's way better than all of those guys. So, yeah, Gene Silva is easily the best fighter who's ranked at the number 11 spot in the UFC. All right, at number 10, I have got Rafael Fiziev. This was another kind of tough spot. I was debating between Fiziev and who was the other one? It was between Fiziev and actually Henry Cejudo. I know you guys might be like, what the hell, Henry Cejudo? But I actually still think Cejudo's really good. He's just been facing really tough opposition. If you guys, like, in the Song Yadong fight, he was very competitive with Song up until the eye poke. And, I mean, outside of that, he lost to Merab. Like, everybody loses to Merab. And he had a very close fight with Aljamain Sterling for the belt. So I still do think that Cejudo is good, and I do expect Cejudo to beat Peyton Talbot when they fight at the end of the year. But I do think that Rafael Fiziev is the best pick here. Fiziev, one of my favorite fighters, super fun to watch. I love seeing his bounce back win against Ignacio Bahamondes earlier this year at the Azerbaijan fight night, because he was on a 3-fight losing streak going into that one. But this is one of, like, the least legit 3-fight losing streaks you could possibly have. Like, the first loss to Justin Gaethje, razor close. You could argue that Fiziev won the first fight. The loss to Gamrot, he blew his knee out. That's why I have the asterisk on it. And then the second loss to Gaethje was on 10 days' notice, and it was still a super competitive fight. So I still think that Rafael Fiziev is a very high-level lightweight. I wish that he didn't get hurt in the Charles Oliveira fight, because they were scheduled to fight. I wish we could have seen that. That would have been an amazing fight. But I feel like he should be back pretty soon, because I don't think it was a major injury that he suffered. And yeah, I'm excited to see his next fight. All right, at the number 9 spot, I have got welterweight Carlos Prates. This was decently competitive spot. Mario Bautista was a guy I considered. Dariush, maybe, like Robert Whittaker. Yeah, it was really it was mostly Mario Bautista and Whittaker who I kind of considered, but I ended up settling with Carlos Prates, and I think that he's definitely the best fighter who's ranked number 9 in their division. I love Carlos Prates. If you guys don't know, super fun fighter to watch, great personality. His last win over Jeff Neal, absolute sick knockout, like sick knockout. One of the best knockouts of the year for sure. And his only UFC loss came on very short notice to Ian Gary. And Ian Gary is a very tough opponent to face, especially on short notice, because he's super strong defensively. Like, he's one of the best. He's got some of the best striking defense in the entire UFC, if not the best, because he's super hard to hit. He's got very good offensive and defensive grappling, and he's a very frustrating fighter to fight just because he's so hard to hit. And in the 5th round of that fight, Carlos Prates was so close to putting him out. I don't know. I think he gassed out or something at the end, and he wasn't able to quite get that finish. But Ian Gary was in a very bad spot, and that being your only UFC loss, I mean, you can't have much better losses than that. So I am going to be picking Prates to beat Leon Edwards. I think that's going to be a very interesting fight to watch, because I do think that Leon definitely has a chance to win, but I favor Prates, and I'm very excited to see how that fight plays out. All right, at the number 8 spot, I've got another welterweight. I've got number 8 ranked Michael Morales. This was a fairly easy pick for me. I mean, there's some other decent options like Mateusz Gamrot, Steve Garcia is now ranked number 8 in his division, and he's a guy who I also think is super underrated. But I think that it's definitely Michael Morales. If you guys have seen my predictions for the next title fight in each division video, I actually picked Michael Morales to be the next opponent for whoever the welterweight champ is going to be, whether it be JDM or Islam, because I think that Michael Morales is going to beat Sean Brady, and I think that if Morales beats Sean Brady, it's going to be by a pretty, it's going to be in an emphatic fashion. I think that if he beats Sean Brady, it's probably going to be by knockout. And I think that if he's able to get like a big highlight reel knockout against an opponent at Sean Brady's level, I think that that could kind of catapult him to the front of the line for a welterweight title shot. Kind of like how Jack Della Maddalena was able to kind of skip over a couple guys to get his title shot because of his huge knockout over Gilbert Burns. So I think Michael Morales is a very elite fighter. I think he's a championship level guy. And I'm super excited to see how his fight against Sean Brady plays out because I think that's a very interesting matchup. All right, at the number 7 spot, I have got light heavyweight Azamat Murzakanov. Some of you may know, but I love Azamat too. I'm very high on him. I predicted that he was going to knock out Alexander Rakic in the first or second round, and that is exactly what happened. And I'm glad that a lot of people are starting to recognize how good he is after that fight because he was a guy who was very under the radar for a long time. I mean, part of it is his fault. He has been fairly inactive, and he has had a couple positive drug tests. But, I mean, I'm not going to get into it now, but it wasn't like he was doing performance-enhancing drugs or anything. He took, like, a supplement that was tainted. So, not entirely his fault, but still, Murzakanov, another guy, like, I think he's a championship-level fighter in the light heavyweight division. At this point, he's probably one win away from a title shot. I think that his next opponent is going to be like a Khalil Roundtree or maybe like a Magomed Ankalaev. I think a fight against Ankalaev would be sick. That would be such an interesting matchup, and I would love to see it. But, I mean, honestly, I think I might pick Azamat regardless of who his next opponent is. I would definitely pick him to beat Khalil Roundtree. Against Ankalaev, I wouldn't be as sure, but I would still probably lean towards Azamat. And, I mean, like, he's so good. Like, he's really so good, and I think that he's probably going to be in a title shot sooner or later. So I think that he is definitely the best UFC fighter ranked at the 7th spot. All right, at number 6, I have got featherweight Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen has not fought in a very long time. It's been a year plus at this point, but I still think that he is a very high-level fighter. He's had a couple unfortunate losses recently, especially the Movsar loss. You could definitely argue that he won that fight. I personally believe that he won that fight, but I mean, it was very close. And then obviously the loss to Max Holloway, which is not like Max Holloway beats every featherweight ever except for Volk and Ilia Topuria. So hopefully Arnold Allen can heal up soon because he's been struggling with a lot of injuries since his last fight against Giga Chikadze. And I hope that when he comes back, he puts on a performance to kind of remind people how elite he is. Honorable mention to Ian Gary here. I was very close to picking him since I also think Ian Gary is a very high-level fighter. But I just slightly gave the edge to Arnold Allen, like very, very slightly. It was very close. I still think, like, it's no disrespect to Ian Gary. Like, I don't like Ian Gary, but I still think that he's a very good fighter. But I did end up going with Arnold Allen here. All right, at the number 5 spot, I have got welterweight Kamaru Usman. This was one of the toughest ones to pick because, I mean, if we look at the guy who's ranked number 5, you've got like Tatsuro Taira in the flyweight division, who I think is very highly of Taira. Song Yadong is up there. Aljamain Sterling, Justin Gaethje, Kamaru Usman, obviously. Brendan Allen, Jan Blachowicz. I wasn't really considering those guys, but it was a very tough spot to pick. But I did end up going with Kamaru Usman. Usman's last win over Joaquin Buckley, absolute dominant performance. Vintage Kamaru Usman right there. I thought that was a pretty easy fight to pick. I kind of expected him to steamroll Buckley like that. But still, a lot of people weren't. He was like a plus 200 underdog in that fight. And I think he really reminded everybody that he's still very similar to the same guy that he was in his prime. If you look at his losses, the first Leon loss, last minute knockout, Kamaru was winning that fight. The second loss, very close fight. And then obviously he lost to Hamzat on very short notice at middleweight, a fight that arguably could have been a draw. So, I mean, Kamaru's, I think he's still I think he's still fighting at a very high level. He's only very slightly diminished from his prime. And I think, especially with the Leon losses, because those kind of look weirder by the day, as Leon has now lost to Bilal Muhammad and Sean Brady. I think that Leon's just like a nightmare matchup for him. I think that's really what it comes down to. And I think that Kamaru Usman is still a guy who could contend for a welterweight title. I do think he needs one more win, though. He seems to think that if he sits out, he's going to get a title shot. That's not going to happen because of how like tightly contested the welterweight division is right now. I mean, you've got like 4 or 5 guys that are angling for title shots right now, and everybody else is looking to fight except for Kamaru Usman. So he needs another fight. I personally think a fight with Shavkat makes a ton of sense since Shavkat's looking to come back early next year after his injuries, and he's like the only guy available for Usman to potentially fight. So I think that one would make a ton of sense. But Kamaru Usman is still an elite fighter, and I think a lot of people sometimes forget that. All right, at the number 4 spot, this was a pretty easy pick for me. I went with number 4 ranked lightweight Max Holloway. Holloway's still like he's still fighting at an extremely high level. As we've seen in his last couple wins over Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, like he's not the same fighter that he once was. He's not like that crazy volume striker, but he swapped that out for much more power. Like he hits hard nowadays. Like obviously he knocked out Gaethje, he dropped Dustin twice, he knocked out TKZ, he dropped Arnold Allen. Like he's hitting motherfuckers hard nowadays. And I think that even though his chin's not the same anymore, Ilya did crack his chin, which is going to be kind of scary for him moving forward. But skill-wise, I think he's still very close to what he was in his prime. And yeah, I mean, he's a guy, he's probably going to fight Charles next. I think that fight makes a ton of sense, and I think that Holloway will win that fight. So if he beats Charles, he's probably looking at another title shot. So Max Holloway, still a very elite fighter. All right, at the number 3 spot, I have got number 3 ranked bantamweight Petr Yan. This was another one that I thought was pretty straightforward. I mean, like Sean Strickland, Shavkat, Charles Oliveira, like there are good fighters in the other division, like Brandon Royval. There are a lot of other good fighters ranked at the number 3 spot, but I think Yan is the best fairly clearly. I mean, Yan, another guy who is still skill-wise as elite as ever. You look at, I mean, I know this has been like a frequent topic of discussion amongst the MMA fan base, but he really does have only one real loss, you know? Like, I hate to be that guy, but the Merab loss is kind of the only real one on his resume. Sean O'Malley fight, I thought he won that, and I know a lot of people agree with me. The second Aljo fight, I personally thought that fight was a draw. I know a lot of people think that one was a loss for Yan, and I think you could call it a loss. I don't think there's any way that Yan won that fight, but I personally thought it was a draw. And then, I mean, obviously, he kneed Aljo in the head, which was a DQ, but he was winning that fight. So I still think Yan is skill-wise as elite as ever. He is slightly diminished athletically, though. If you guys, like, it's kind of noticeable. He's just not as quick anymore. His reads, like his reaction time isn't quite the same, which does kind of suck because he has dealt with a ton of injuries in the past few years. So I do unfortunately think that he's probably not going to make it back to the belt because I don't think he's going to beat Merab. And after that, like, I don't even know where he goes from there. But he is still a very elite fighter, and I think that he would still be extremely competitive. And I would probably pick him to beat any bantamweight but Merab. All right, at the number 2 spot, I have got number 2 ranked lightweight Arman Tsarukyan. I think that the long layoff for Arman has kind of led a lot of people to forget just how good he is. This dude, like, he handled Charles Oliveira pretty easily, especially on the ground. That's, like, the really shocking part. Like, Charles is a guy who's got some of the best jiu-jitsu in UFC history. He's one of the greatest submission threats in UFC history, and Arman was able to neutralize him on the ground for 95% of those exchanges. And on the feet, he was picking Charles apart. I don't understand the narrative where people say that Charles won that fight. Like, he won the first round because he almost finished him with the guillotine. But outside of that, like, those like 10, 15 seconds of submission attempts do not compare to the work that Arman was doing for the rest of the round. And like, bro, I like Charles. Obviously I love Charles and I don't like Arman that much, but you just have to look at it objectively. And Arman, I think that he's going to run through Dan Hooker. I think that was probably the easiest matchup they could have given him outside of like Justin Gaethje. And I'm really excited to see him fight for the belt because I think that stylistically he is the worst matchup for Ilia Topuria. I would definitely still pick Ilia, but I think that Arman could give him the most trouble out of anybody that he's faced so far. So I think Arman is pretty clearly the best UFC fighter ranked at the number 2 spot. All right, at the number 1 spot, I think that the best number 1 contender in the UFC is Dricus du Plessis. I did not count Islam for this one because he is going to be moving up to welterweight, or he's going to get removed from the lightweight rankings in like a week and a half or whatever his next fight is. So I didn't count him for this. If I was including Islam, I would pick Islam, but I don't feel like I don't feel like he really counts because he's about to get removed from the rankings. But this is obviously a super competitive ranking. I mean, you've got guys like Umar, Movsar Evloev, Bilal Muhammad, Dricus, Yuri, Cyril Gane. I mean, Cyril Gane is not on the same level as those guys, but still super competitive spot. But I did end up going with Dricus du Plessis because of his pedigree as a champ. I mean, outside of the Khamzat loss, he's undefeated in the UFC, and that has come with a lot of very good wins. I think his most recent win over Sean Strickland was probably his most impressive performance so far, outside of maybe the Whitaker fight. I mean, this dude 50-45 Sean Strickland on the feet. Like, that is very hard to do. He did not mix in the grappling at all in the second fight, and he was just busting Sean up. Like, he broke his nose badly in the 4th round. I thought he was going to finish him at that point, but beating Sean Strickland that decisively in a pure striking match is not easy to do. So, I mean, and obviously he's got the win over Izzy, the first win over Sean. His win over Robert Whitaker is up there with his best wins because he also like dismantled Whitaker pretty easily, which was kind of unheard of at that point because coming into that fight, Whitaker had only ever lost to Izzy at middleweight. So that one shocked a lot of people. But I mean, Dricus is still a super high level fighter. It sucks for him that Khamzat is in the division because I mean, I don't think he can ever beat Khamzat. We saw how their fight played out. Khamzat just totally controlled him on the ground. But if Khamzat moves up at some point, which I think he probably will, I think that Dricus could definitely have a shot at reclaiming the belt. And I think that he will. I think that he's probably going to face Brendan Allen next. You guys can watch my middleweight matchmaking video if you want to see my fights to make for the whole top 15. But I think that a Brendan Allen fight would make a lot of sense as his next fight. And I think that Dricus would pretty easily handle Brendan Allen. And I think that he'd pretty easily handle the rest of the top 10 outside of maybe like, I think Fluffy Hernandez would probably be the toughest test, but Dricus, still a super elite fighter. He's still one of the best fighters in UFC. He's like probably borderline top 10. So I think he is the best number 1 contender in the UFC. And for the best champ in the UFC, I mean, you guys probably already know who it's going to be. It is lightweight champion Ilia Topuria. I mean, we go over this every time I have Ilia in a video. I mean, he's who I think is the pound for pound number 1 in the UFC. I think he's the best. Like, I think he's the best fighter in the UFC. If he's the best fighter, he's the best champion. And I think that he's going to end up being the greatest of all time. Like, I say this a lot, but I think if he continues at this rate, I think that he will be the GOAT because his resume is already extremely impressive for a guy with as little experience, like relatively speaking, in the UFC. Like wins over Charles Oliveira, Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski. That's insane. It's insane to beat all those guys this early, and I think he's just going to keep stacking wins. And I don't think anybody beats him except for maybe Islam if they fight at 170. If they were to fight at 155, I would pick Ilia. But if they end up fighting at 170, which is what currently looks like the only possible outcome for a Ilia versus Islam fight, I would probably lean towards Islam at that point just because of the like ridiculous size advantage that he'd have at that point. But that'd be Ilia moving up 2 weight classes to fight the second best fighter in the world. And that's like the only fight where I could even consider the idea of him losing. Like, that's how good this dude is. He's insane. Like, there's not much else I can say other than that. He's the best fighter in the world right now. And I think if he stays in the lightweight division, he is going to face pretty much zero competition, probably for the rest of his career. So, yeah. All right, those are my picks for the best UFC fighter at each spot in the rankings. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with some of these picks. You definitely could. Like, there were a few spots that were very close, and I could definitely see an argument for choosing another guy. But if you agree, like I said, if you agree or disagree, just let me know in the comments. Make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And thank you guys for watching.